Well, hello there. It's so nice of you that you took the time out of your day to watch another one of my silly little videos. As you can see, I'm deep into my Christmas preparations. Or at least I would have been. I actually wanted to grab a few more last-minute Christmas presents, but the shops in the area seem to have closed up early today. The streets around here are deserted. Well, that means I have a bit of time left, so let's get into the holiday spirit with a good old Christmas classic, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Once upon a time there was this old geezer who threw down with the 3 Christmas ghosts. Wait, that's not how I remember the story. Oh, of course, that's not the novel by Charles Dickens. That's the game based on the novel. Ebenezer and the Invisible World. A game based on Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, where a grumpy and greedy old misanthrope gets visited by 3 Christmas spirits, who show him the error of his ways and turn him into a kind man who cares for his neighbors and helps those in need. And if we believe the game, he also turned into an incredibly handsome older gentleman with astonishing acrobatic abilities who fights all sorts of sinister specters and abhorrent apparitions with his sleek walking cane. And right off the bat, I want to talk about the artwork. While the game itself looks fine, the artwork during the few cutscenes has some cheapness to it. I mean, it looks clean, it is well drawn, but it just has this archetypical design to the characters you know from every other mobile game. Case in point, Ebenezer himself. He doesn't look like an old man. He looks like a drawing of a generic man with a white moustache and some wrinkles painted on top. It works for the actual character models, and later character portraits look a lot better, but I really don't care much for these drawings. Now you might think that an action game isn't the most obvious choice for a game based on this particular story. I mean, when I think of Ebenezer Scrooge, I see a prudent and careful, maybe slow and a bit weak old man who solves his problems with cunning and charisma. Kinda like in a graphic adventure game of sorts. Not a game where you run and jump around, fling yourself through the air and wail on all kinds of evil spirits. But here we are! Look at him go! So yeah, definitely a weird premise, but the game makes it work. Well, kinda. Or more accurately, the game is quite fun and it makes good use of the setting. Ebenezer might not be the most fitting protagonist gameplay-wise, but the game presents him faithfully and it makes an effort to explain his athletic abilities. At least most of them. But more on that later. So, what is the premise of this game? You'd be surprised, but this is actually a sequel to Dickens' story. As we find out, the Christmas spirits are rather busy saving all kinds of people all over the world. And just recently, they gave an industrialist named Caspar Malthus a good haunt, you know, to bring him back to the right path and all that. And they succeeded! Well, that was a fun yet short little story, and yeah, of course there's more to it. Because, after the 3 spirits left, a 4th spectre visited Caspar and enticed him to follow an even more sinister path. And this is where Ebenezer comes in. After his little run-in with the Christmas ghosts of past, present and future, he is now able to not only see the invisible world, as it is called, with all its ghostly inhabitants, but also interact with it. This makes him the perfect mediator between the living and the dead. And so another ghost appears before him, one Eric Fellows, who urges Ebenezer to save his old friend Caspar Malthus from his own self-destructive ambition. And Ebenezer, reformed by his experiences and sympathetic to this man's similar plight, and to honor Jacob Marley's memory, agrees to help. Ebenezer's quest takes him all over London, where he has to find clues about Caspar's whereabouts and the reasons for his inhospitable demeanor, and collect trinkets related to Caspar's past, present and future, to show him the error of his ways and remind him of the good in his heart. But this journey won't be easy, as countless restless spirits block Ebenezer's way and try to prevent him from accomplishing his goals, alongside Casper's own guards and mercenaries, and many of the places Ebenezer has to visit aren't the most accessible, to say the least. In that regard, the game very much follows the Metroid formula. It's a non-linear platformer that focuses more on action, melee combat in the case of this game, than on precision. There are some tighter platforming challenges here and there, but mostly traversal is pretty lenient. There are no bottomless pits, well, close to none, and touching hazardous ground only sets you back to the last safe location, at the cost of a sliver of health. The challenge arises more so from avoiding enemies and hazards while making your way through the labyrinthian levels. And along the way, you will encounter many different roadblocks and obstacles. Artificial barriers of blockage that you can only overcome with the right abilities. And I really like the way they handled your abilities in this game. In the Metroid series, your special abilities are locked behind suit and weapon upgrades. In the Castlevania games, it's magic spells and collected souls. In this game, your unlockable abilities are represented by the ghosts coming to Ebenezer's help. So Ebenezer doesn't perform this cool-ass downward kick himself to fling himself further up into the air. It's the spirit of a sneaky street urchin who performs this feat. Another spirit takes him by the hand and dashes through the air and even through mystical spirit barriers. A circus acrobat lets him double jump by giving him an extra boost. The ghostly triplets guide him through mirrors, the watchmaker stops time, the soldier charges at your foes. So when it comes to presentation, this game leans closer towards Castlevania than Metroid, though overall I'd say it has more in common with the latter. The Castlevania games, at least those molded after the Metroid formula, tend to heavily incorporate RPG elements in addition to platforming and exploration. You level up and raise your stats by defeating enough enemies, juggle a lot of equipment pieces, items and all kinds of different weapons. And it seems most of the games wearing that elusive Metroidvania mantle follow the Castlevania approach. So when a game in that genre takes more after Metroid, I can really appreciate it. While character upgrades do exist in the form of health and magic increases, and while there is a selection of equipable items to tweak and supplement your playstyle, your character, for the most part, doesn't grow stronger. The difficulty stems from how well you handle yourself against the different enemies and their fighting styles, and not from ever increasing damage numbers. You need as many strikes to defeat the same foe at the end of the game as you did at the beginning. And generally, enemies deal a comparable amount of damage throughout the whole game. So you're never over or under leveled and are never in a position where you need to grind to overcome a challenge. You always have everything you need. Sure, some weapons make certain fights easier, some equipment can give you an edge, and having stocked up on healing items certainly turns the tide in your favor, but none of it is necessary. That's why I try to avoid calling this game a Metroidvania, because aside from its focus on melee combat and the use of ghosts to represent your special abilities, there's not a whole lot Vania in this game. And as for the ghosts, there is another game I'm reminded of quite a bit when it comes to those ghosts. Dark Souls. You see, these ghosts come in two variants. Blue spirits that come to Ebenezer's aid and help him overcome many of the game's obstacles, and red phantoms that invade this world and brutally and mercilessly attack Ebenezer's foes. Well, all jokes aside, that's how they actually work, and I do think that the color coding was a clever piece of design. You see, all the blue ghosts grant Ebenezer traversal abilities and are mandatory to get through the game, while the red ghosts are, with the exception of your first companion, all optional and are exclusively used for combat purposes. Well, I say exclusively, but two of them actually have another purpose, but I'll get to them in due time. Every one of those ghosts, again with the exception of your very first companion, is acquired by completing a task for them. a side quest, so to speak. Some of them are really quick affairs, some are more elaborate, some might be a bit confusing as to what to do, or more accurately, where to go, but all of them are rather easy. It most of the time comes down to go to a place and interact with an obvious MacGuffin, and sometimes visit a person in town after that, and that's it. A few times, like maybe 2 or 3, you have to fight a special enemy, but that's all the variety you'll get. Not all of those quests have been perfectly thought through. Some of them appear more like an afterthought and have just been thrown into the game for the sake of consistency. I can respect that, but I'd rather have them better integrated into the overall progression than as they are now. A short and meaningless distraction from the actual level or plot or whatnot. Thing is, this is only the case for some of the Blue Ghosts quests, so the mandatory ones. The actual side quests, while not that special either, all have you explore the map and use your abilities to find hidden or far out locations. But the mandatory tasks that are or should be woven into the main progression feel a bit tacked on. This could have been solved a lot better, though to be honest, the writing on a whole isn't that great. I've already spoken about the somewhat ludicrous premise. While the idea of another selfish guy in need of some Christmas joy isn't all that bad, especially the notion that because of some interference from an evil spirit, the ghosts of Christmas failed and now a mortal has to help out, but Ebenezer himself jumping into the fray and fighting a bunch of evil ghosts on his own is a bit far-fetched. And while the actual story beats that follow aren't too bad, they're written and presented a bit ineptly. But let me take you through this step by step. Before Ebenezer can even attempt to help Caspar, he has to learn more about him. So he searches for his diary that's hidden somewhere in the London Observatory. Why is it hidden in there and not in Caspar's apartment or his office? Well, no reason. But I mean, the game has to establish somehow as to why we have to travel back and forth all over London. But before we can reach the observatory, we have to throw down with Caspar's guards, because they are on high alert due to a workers' strike, and recently reformed Ebenezer of course takes the side of the proletariat. Though to be fair, Ebenezer's characterization is rather well done. He's not a goody two-shoes, he's not a fully heroic character. I mean, he blindly charges into danger, but his reasoning is alright for the most part. We just have to give him some leeway since he's in an action game and not a graphic adventure. But he often and loudly voices his disdain with other people. He laments that he has to fix certain things around the city, even though he pays a lot of taxes that could and should have been used instead. And he doesn't shy away from shouting humbug at his opponents. But yeah, when Caspar's enforcers crack down on some protesters, he doesn't go full-on socialist on them. Instead, he just argues in favor of a non-violent resolution. And when that fails, he happily resorts to violence himself. The game implies, with the help of some cartoonish graphic effects, that Ebenezer doesn't actually kill the guards but only neutralizes them. But they still turn into glitter afterwards. And soon after, he has to face off against the commander of Caspar's soldiers. And both of them are so very gentlemanish towards each other. But yeah, a fight breaks loose, and this is the first boss fight of this game. There aren't too many of those to be found, including the final boss. There are, I believe, 5 in total, so not even each chapter is concluded by one. This handsome fella here is furthermore supposed to be a recurring boss and somewhat of a rival to Ebenezer, but not much will come of it. The fight itself is pretty good for a first boss. Warren, yeah that's his name, has a pretty varied moveset. He can swing his saber, dash attack, summon a flaming pillar and jump into the air and attack you with some sort of illusionary double team attack. He also has you surrounded by his soldiers and automatons who attack you whenever you get too close to the edge of the combat arena. His attack patterns give you quite a few options for handling him. He pauses long enough after each attack for you to get to grips with the timing of your cane attacks to perform a 3-hit combo, and all his attacks are telegraphed overtly enough for you to either dodge them with your backstab, that provides you with a generous amount of iframes, or with a jump, that gives you more distance and flexibility, but without the invincibility. And he doesn't move around in between his attacks, so you have an easy time using your ghost abilities. So all in all, it's a pretty darn good first boss. Too bad the rest of the bosses doesn't get much more involved than this one. After you've dealt with Warren and he pretended like he's doing you a favor by retreating, God, I hate it when games do that. I want fair and square, stop pretending like they had the upper hand. But yeah, after that, the path to the observatory is clear. Along the way, you also have to complete your first blue ghost request. Similarly to Metroid, the game pretty early on put some roadblocks in your way. Metroid used a narrow gap you had to roll under with your morph ball, and this game uses some walls that are just ever so slightly too tall for you to jump over. So you got to help this deceased little rascal and he will help you climb the walls by letting you jump off balloons. Yeah, so this isn't a high jump, or a charged jump, or a wall jump, or a double jump. It's just this highly situational ability to interact with certain objects when the game wants you to jump higher or over wider gaps. It is a fine challenge most of the time, but why couldn't I have a more useful or utilized ability? Well, to be fair, it does have a little bit of combat ability in that it gives you a downward jump attack that also lets you bounce off enemies, and you can even use it to access some out of reach areas early, though the game doesn't really make use of this little quirk. It's more of a nice reward for experimentation than an actual game mechanic. Sadly, the next ability you learn in the observatory is also rather situational. It's a forward dash that lets you pass through these spirit grates. And since I already spotted these glowing blue thingies that most certainly would be used for another ghost ability, I presumed that pretty much all of my traversal abilities would be this restrictive. Good thing I was wrong. The abilities and their usage get a bit more complex and involved later on. It's only the first two, and only during the early parts of the game, that their usage is held back. Later on you have to jump wider gaps, use your dash at the right time to cover more ground without overshooting your target destination, and combine multiple different abilities to make your way through a platforming section. The observatory itself functions more like a dungeon than the city streets. While there are many shortcuts and connections between the different areas, the city streets fulfill the role of a hub to connect the other parts of the game world. And while most screens in the city are flat and straightforward, with the more vertical screens being still open enough to allow for easy traversal in any direction, the other locations are more comprised of cramped or labyrinthian corridors. It's a lot harder to avoid enemies in these sections, and to make things worse, these dungeons are also laden with traps and stage hazards like spikes and nasty goo. And during these parts, the enemy placement sometimes comes off as a bit arbitrary, random, or outright unfair. And speaking of unfair, you might take a lot of unnecessary hits due to some glitchy controls. On multiple occasions my controls locked up and didn't let me jump or attack for a few moments. I don't know whether this was because the game couldn't handle me being in a certain spot, or maybe too many things were happening simultaneously so the game picked and chose what to execute and what not. I don't know. But on more than one occasion my character just didn't attack an enemy right in front of him, even though I hammered on the button. Then sometimes the game just rapid-fired attacks without me pressing anything, or performing double jumps when I only pressed once. Maybe something wrong with the input buffering. There were also multiple occasions where the game couldn't handle Ebenezer riding on floating platforms. He hovered in the air above it or couldn't stay ducked, or again, the jumping just wouldn't work, I guess because the game thought I was already in the air. In addition to that, it seems that the game doesn't really have any, how should I call it, input leniency. You see, many platformers employ a system in where, when you run off a ledge, you just have a few frames to still be able to jump. If a game doesn't offer this leniency, it can feel really jarring, because it's hard to grasp just how wide your character's collision box is, as well as that of the platform you're standing on. So a drop can happen rather suddenly, and having the option to still jump a few frames afterwards makes everything a bit smoother. You don't really notice it, it just works as it should, at least from your perspective. Yeah, this game doesn't have this, it seems. So a lot of times I just dropped straight down a platform while trying to jump to the next one. Now, this isn't actually a glitch. It's just a bit of player-unfriendly design. But of course, the game does have its share of glitches and problems. Be it the aforementioned movement issues on floating platforms, you getting locked into certain animations, ladders that let you climb just a few pixels further than they are tall, or text boxes assigned to the wrong character. But getting back to the enemies for a moment. They already show some good variety, even in the second level. We have some slow walking brutes that swing at you whenever you come into melee range, some stationary enemies that attack you from afar, and some flying ones homing in on you, and by that, preventing you from camping out in an advantageous spot for too long. And then there are those that are generally just a nuisance to keep you on your toes, the ones crawling up and down surfaces or jumping all over the place. Or the ones teleporting around and attacking you from off screen with a vertical beam that cuts through the whole screen. Some enemies hang from the ceiling and swing left and right, some charge at you when they spot you. And many of the basic foes come in different versions. The brutes start off with a club, but get later outfitted with a shield and finally a long-reaching spear, or a shockwave creating two-handed hammer. The projectile throwing enemies get variants that can hide behind cover or move or fly around. While the regular enemies never get too complex in their movesets or attack patterns, they show a lot of creative ideas. One of my favorites is a late game enemy that swings a morning star overhead whenever you get in range, but the spiked ball has an active hitbox even when he isn't attacking. So you can't just walk up to him from behind or get close after his attack. Defeating him requires a lot of finesse and patience. Is what I would say if it weren't for the fact that you can pretty easily cheese any enemy in the game as soon as you get a ranged weapon of your own. Morningstar prevents you from getting close? Just shoot the dude dead. Flying enemy shoots you from across the screen? Well, shoot the dude dead. Screaming lady gives you trouble? Shoot the dude dead. Not even the bosses are safe from this tactic. So yeah, this isn't the most tightly crafted combat system, but still, the enemy variety is worth mentioning and every variant gets its own detailed bestiary entry. There's some good lore in this game, be it enemies, summons or even items you find. Throughout the game you can find a lot of hidden rooms, sometimes behind illusionary walls and sometimes just out of your way, off the beaten path, that house a so-called heirloom. Those heirlooms are equipable items of which you can activate up to 4 at a time and whose effects range from small damage upgrades on selected attacks to bigger upgrades under certain circumstances, to all kinds of different effects. Like a passive health regeneration every few seconds, a greater chance for rare materials or health items to drop, an increased chance for enemies to drop gold, additional effects on certain special abilities, and so on. There's a whole bunch of heirlooms to be found in the game, and the best thing about those is their item description, because each and every one of them tells another story about their greedy owner who got visited by the Christmas spirits and shown the error of their ways. It's like a whole bunch of Christmas carols within this Christmas Carol sequel. To find Casper's diary in the observatory, you need another ghost ability, and to get this one, you need to do the ghost of an astronomer a favor in collecting a book for a researcher. After having helped her, she's so thankful that she allows Ebenezer to hijack her text box and invite himself to the top of the observatory, where he finally finds the diary and by that stumbles upon a clue as to help Casper. It seems he has a very warped view of his mother. He even believes her to be dead, though we learn from our most recent undead companion that she's in fact locked up in the local insane asylum. So this is our next stop, where we try to find Casper's mother and learn more about his past. Now, the locations you explore in this game are pretty varied, both in terms of level design as well as visually. The streets of London are majestic and picturesque, like a scene from a postcard, with the fluffy white snow and the warm light from the windows. The graphic designers didn't cheap out on the hand-drawn aesthetic. The character models are a bit too sharp and sometimes stick out, but it's not that jarring in motion. It works rather well, even though, especially on the London streets, some of the background characters' animation looks a bit off. The observatory is mystical with all the scientific and occult apertures and of course the many shelves full of countless books and the dust particles gently floating around. The asylum, on the other hand, is a cramped and haunting place. It starts off with an expensive looking lobby that appears nice enough, but the deeper you travel inside the asylum, the more depressing it gets, with the thick steel doors and metal plating on the walls and floors, and cages swinging in the foreground with prisoners reaching out to you from behind the cold steel bars. The necropolis is an unreal place with floating rocks shrouded in darkness, yet illuminated by ghostly lights. And the factory is this big artificial space with lots of scaffoldings to supplement the vertical level design and large stage hazards contextualized as pits filled with molten metal. In the asylum we learn the ability to travel through mirrors. At first I thought this was a kind of fast travel system, but it's actually isolated platforming challenges to connect 2 points on the map. There is a fast travel system in form of the train stations in the game. During the early game it felt a bit like there weren't enough fast travel points for you to comfortably explore the map and quickly get back to your little shopping area where you can exchange upgrade materials for an increase to your health and magic energy, or buy food items to heal yourself, or a small selection of heirlooms. But the further you progress in the game, the more shortcuts and train stations you open up. Some places are still quite a hassle to reach, but near the end of the game, when you try to find the last hidden rooms in search of heirlooms and weapons, you have enough fast travel points to comfortably get around the city. Though backtracking through some of the areas, even after opening up all the shortcuts, can get a bit tedious. 1 or 2 more stations would have alleviated this problem, though it's really not that great of an issue. And since I have mentioned the weapons again, let's talk about them for a moment. You start off the game with your standard cane. You can perform a 3-hit combo with the right timing and it deals medium damage. In the asylum, I found my first additional weapon, a spirit axe. It doesn't allow for combo attacks, but it has a lot more reach than the cane and it deals a lot more damage. And it attacks in a bit of an arc, so you can hit enemies above you more easily. Weapons in this game come in 2 forms. Different canes and really different spirit weapons. The canes pretty much all work the same, just with sometimes a higher reach or attack speed or higher damage output, with the exception of one of them which shoots projectiles with every hit, which makes it the most useful tool in your arsenal. Ranged attack aside though, the canes are your more balanced weapons and offer a lot of versatility with the combo attack as well as an upward strike. While the spirit weapons function more like your summons. You actually do just summon the weapon the moment you strike and it performs a single hit. Always the same single hit. There are no combos, there's no flow to your attacks. It feels a bit clunky, but I think this is on purpose. The versatility with those comes from the variety of your spirit weapons. You don't have many, but each works in a vastly different way. I already talked about the axe, but there's also a whip straight out of Castlevania with ludicrous range and a sword that attacks with ludicrous speed. But again, after acquiring the fireball shooting cane, I stuck with it because it's just vastly superior to any other weapon. Smacking enemies across the head isn't the only way of causing damage though. Half of the ghosts you recruit fulfill combat roles. While you can use some of your Traversal Ghosts for combat purposes, these Red Phantoms' main usage is damaging enemies. Yeah, when I say main usage, I'm kinda implying that there's more to it, and I will get to that soon. With the press of a button, you call the selected ghost to your side and have them attack whatever it is in front of you for the price of some magic energy. Some ghosts are straightforward and just throw a punch straight forward, but some attack in an arc. Some attack all enemies in a wider area. One of them just stops time for a short while. One ghost woman has her falcons circle around you to damage all enemies stupid enough to get close to you. The lamplighter just stays in place and twirls his flaming stick around, creating a damage zone. The warden uses his chain to have his attack travel outwards to the left and right. You have to try them all and see for yourself which ones work for you in which situation. Some are better than others, but it mostly comes down to preference. By using your summons, you somewhat train them, or maybe just get more acquainted with them. There's not really an explanation in the game, but after completing their challenge, they get either a boost to their effect or additional effects. The soldier gets a higher critical chance, the falcon lady sends out an additional bird, stuff like that. Now, as for the additional use, there are two ghosts. One is a strong man wielding a ball and chain, the other is a railway worker with a massive hammer that not only attack your enemies, but the game world itself. They can tear down brittle walls and floors to open up secret paths and hidden rooms. And I'm really not sure whether I find this ingenious or fucking stupid. So in most games where you need to find puzzle items to open up new paths, be it Zelda-likes or Metroid-likes or actual adventure games, they make it clear when an item or ability can affect your surroundings. In this game, you have to find out by accident that an optional ability can open some of the barriers in your way. You come across these brittle walls way before you get the chance to acquire the first of the two ghosts in question. You even find an heirloom pretty early on that points towards hidden rooms and the like. But my assumption was that I would find an actual ability specifically designed to destroy brittle walls. Well, I guess that is what happened. To make it more unintuitive, these ghosts eat up a large chunk of your spirit energy, so you can't just go around trying to break every wall. More often than not, you're low on magic, so the chance to accidentally discover their hidden use is even lower. But I have to say I kinda like this approach. It diversifies the ghosts even more and has the exploration feel a bit less gamey and gives you some nice satisfaction when you figure it out for yourself. On that note, you rather early on come across some rooms filled with water. There's actually a whole harbor, complete with a stranded ship below the observatory, and you immediately see that the level continues on underwater. So my experience with Metroid and Castlevania told me that I would find some ability to dive at some point during the game. Most certainly down there would be one of the later chapters. Well, that's not the case. You see, during my playthrough I ignored the harbor area since I lacked the diving ability. Rather stupid of me. Conventional gaming logic tells you to explore any way accessible to you before turning back. Because there is no underwater chapter, there is no larger water area. Had I continued my way through the harbor, I would have found another heirloom just sitting there. That grants you the ability to breathe and walk underwater, which gives you access to a few more optional rooms to get some items and summons. And again, I assumed the swimming ability to be some big thing, some major upgrade, something noteworthy, goddammit. Not a random heirloom using up one of my equipment slots, only necessary for a handful of screens to get some optional rewards. It's certainly a unique approach, and by all means not bad at all. it just threw me off a bit. There is one more set of abilities you can discover. Well, it's more like a passive effect you can activate that you don't control directly. There are 3 semi-hidden areas not really obvious to spot on your map, where you can find the actual ghosts of Christmas. Ebenezer even has a bit of a banter with them. And they aid you in your quest by offering you the children of mankind, personified virtues, if you will. You can only equip one at a time, so choose carefully. Do you want to deal a bit more damage with the little archer? Or do you prefer a shield that blocks a single attack and regenerates over time? Or do you want a passive heal that seems to eat through your healing items, so I never equipped it. But yeah, it's a nice little bonus that can become incredibly useful at times. After the asylum, you should already have collected a good amount of materials to upgrade your health and magic, as well as a good variety of summons, heirlooms and even the odd additional weapon. This is where the difficulty massively drops off. Until now, enemies inflicted quite a large amount of damage, and while healing items aren't rare or anything, you haven't been showered in them. But by now you should also have access to a few heirlooms that increase your healing, either by giving you more item drops or actual health drops, or regeneration. You also should have opened up quite a few shortcuts to your safe rooms, which fully heal both your life and magic energy. While enemies can still be a threat, from now on your chances of actually dying are rather low. It also helps that the upcoming areas give you a lot more room to maneuver around than the last 2. So avoiding enemies too tedious to fight also becomes a lot easier. At the end of the asylum, after we had to fight a random patient's ghost that seemed to have nothing really to do with the task at hand, you find Casper's mother, who tells you that she wrote to her son every week, but as per orders of her late husband, her letters were never delivered. This is where Ebenezer and his ghost companions come up with the plan to confront Casper with his past and possible future in a similar way to what the Christmas ghosts attempted before giving up on poor Casper, it seems. So next we have to head out to the necropolis to find Casper's deceased brother, a man who has been similarly corrupted by his father as Casper has. He believes himself to be a righteous man and justified in seeing himself above others, so you have to beat some common sense into him. The boss fight is alright in a similar way to the first boss, and herein lies the problem. The first boss fight incorporated a lot of well-telegraphed enemy attacks and gave you ample opportunity to react to them and swap between offense and defense. And while the later bosses are still very creatively designed and come with some good and interesting attacks, the fights themselves never really evolve further from the first boss fight. The challenge never increases. Sure, some later boss attacks cover more ground or deal more damage, but purely mechanical, they don't differ much from the first boss. So yeah, all the following bosses are cakewalks. After beating Victor Malthus, you receive his rusted and faded medals for his service in the military that his father threw out after Victor died in the war. This kinda opens his eyes to his father's manipulation and ruthless ambition. And at that point I began to suspect the father of being the fourth Spectre to visit Casper and ensuring his path towards his own demise. A suspicion that was further reinforced a bit later when we have to climb the observatory again, to find a memento from Casper's past to remind him of his starry-eyed pursuit of knowledge, not for material or monetary gain, but for the pure enjoyment of learning and understanding more about the world. There, we are surprised by a sinister apparition. It seems Ebenezer's past deeds aren't just forgiven by him throwing some money around and letting some Christmas joy into his heart. That's what the Phantom actually says. We're confronted by Ebenezer himself, or more, his potential future, still looming over him. We have to prove to ourselves and maybe destiny itself that we actually have changed, that we are a better man now than we were before. The fight itself is again pretty creatively designed, but still on a similar level of challenge as all the others. I took some cheap hits when some of the random attacks overlapped or happened simultaneously, or when I got hit by a projectile even though I dodged it, but it didn't really matter much. At this point I had plenty of health and plenty of healing, so it wasn't really a challenge. And after the fight we find out that this of course wasn't actually a representation of Ebenezer's future. It's in fact Gaius Malthus, Casper's and Victor's father, who continues even in the afterlife to manipulate, use and abuse others for his lowly wants and needs. He's the one spurring on Casper to continue with his work on some nefarious device, and he's the one sicking all the evil spirits on us to prevent us from reaching Casper. The game doesn't outright confirm it, but I guess with this it implies that he actually was the fourth spirit. The game at least doesn't offer a different explanation. All that's left after that is confronting Casper at his factory. But before Ebenezer pushes on, his companions warn him of a great and malicious force having awakened due to Gaius's meddling. Oh, and here I thought the game was soon to unveil the payoff to some rather subdued foreshadowing. You see, pretty early in the game, while traversing the streets of London, you can see this large ghost in the background, held in place by a couple of chains. The game never elaborates on it, but later you see him again in the necropolis, closer now. He even tracks you with his eyes, but he still doesn't do anything. Yet. So yeah, I was sure Gaius used all the stray souls or negative energy to feed this thing and release it on the city, and you have to confront it in an epic boss fight. But no. The great malicious power just referred to Gaius himself, it seems. The giant plays no part in this story. He's a bit of a background decoration, which is fine, I guess. I just thought there'd be more to it. From the top of the observatory we can take a cable car to the factory. From there we need to make our way over some rooftops, but be careful not to drop down, because these are bottomless pits that hurt you. Which is so weird. Ebenezer can drop down multiple stories without problem, but in like 3 locations this counts as a hazard. In all other places there's something to hurt you. Just a few screens further there are the molten metal baths. So why not use something like that here instead of inconsistent fall damage? It's just a small gripe, but I did notice this during my playthrough. And the problems don't stop here. The factory kinda encompasses one of my biggest problems with the game. So this is a Metroid-like, a game where you explore a rather large map back and forth, acquire new abilities to reach new places or travel to previous locations more easily. Most rooms have multiple exits, so you can enter a challenge from multiple different locations. Yet, the game doesn't always account for that. I'd even go so far and say that the game most of the time doesn't account for that. Most of the rooms don't have tightly crafted challenges, so it doesn't matter from where you enter. But those rooms that do have some special enemies or platforming challenges and whatnot just don't work if you backtrack through them. Enemies don't turn around to face you and attack away from you, moving platforms just don't appear. Some rooms are just way too large to backtrack through, and the factory is the worst offender. So you enter it through the cable car, but you could also use 2 different entrances earlier if you experimented a bit with your abilities. You also unlock a shortcut back to the city after having received the floating ability in the worst side quest the game has to offer. It kinda appeared to me that the team began to rush development at that point. Rooms in the factory are mostly empty and even look a bit copy-pasted. Platforming challenges are virtually non-existent, save for one gauntlet that ends way too soon and doesn't live up to its potential. And of course, all the scenes you break by not adhering to the developer's pre-described order of events. While exploring the factory, making my way up from a side entrance, I came across this Simon Says device. I solved it, but didn't know what it achieved. The game certainly didn't tell me. That is, until I got a bit further and found a locked door and another one of those devices. After solving that one, the game gave me a cutscene showing me one of the locks opening. So I guess the game expected me to come across this machine first. Moving further, I encountered the hardest, most durable enemy in the game. I wailed on him for minutes, but it didn't do squat. He also did not retaliate. I guess I was just beneath him. He didn't even notice my feeble attempts to fight him. That's not the case, of course. I just entered the room from the wrong side again. And he just wasn't active yet. The guy from the first boss fight, my supposed rival, was also there, but he didn't react to me either. Only after I moved past him and nearly reached the right edge of the screen, did a cutscene start with him being surprised by my arrival and a sudden start of the fight. It's more of the same. The guy I wailed on immediately died, which seems to be a horrible fate. Just imagine living in the knowledge that you received fatal damage and are just waiting for the moment it all catches up with you. But yeah, after having defeated Warren a second time, he disappears again and is out of the story. He doesn't come to Casper's aid in the end, he doesn't aid me in leading Casper on the right track again, he's just gone. What a waste. Well, the final confrontation doesn't fare much better. We try to talk Casper out of his malicious ambition, but he won't listen. Then suddenly his mother made her way all the way from the asylum to here and assures him of her love for him. The ghost of his brother convinces him of the evil nature of their father. Well, and then Gaius appears and we have to fight him. Twice. And once again, the fights are fine. Nothing special, nothing especially bad. They just don't live up to what I expect from a game's finale. And after we've won, we get a still image montage where Casper finally stands up to his father. Some of my ghost buddies join in the fight, and I'm not sure if the game accounts for them being missable. It's a pretty epic scene, to be honest, if a bit cliché. And after that, Gaius is finally defeated, and the game ends. And the credits roll. I guess we saved the day, and Casper's soul. He does look rather pissed in the end. Well, I'm sure everything worked out just fine. Yeah, the story isn't that amazing or amazingly told. The setting, on the other hand, is pretty darn great. It's so Christmassy and a lot of attention to detail was put into all the environments and ghosts, both good and bad. Be it the ice skaters on the streets of London or the Christmas wreath on the cell doors in the insane asylum. The game is a visual treat, and it was rather fun to play. Not the most polished game, not the most challenging or complex journey, but a nice little game for something like the Christmas holidays. And it is a worthwhile addition to the small selection of non-Flash Christmas-themed games. So yeah, if you're in the mood for some Christmas goodness, give this game a try. And of course, enjoy the festive time with friends and family. Try to relax a bit. And with that, I wish you a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and just have a great time. Until next time.